Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ava and I was an ex-flight attendant with Singapore Airlines. In today's video, I'll be doing round 2 of answering some of the Q&A that you guys have asked me with regards to flying. The first part of the Q&A, you can check it out over here. But today, the questions that I will be addressing is actually posted by one of the YouTube users called A Cup of Tea with Sugar and Cook 5548. And this person typed a very good list of questions which I think will help many of you who are aspiring cabin crew, aspiring flight attendant. So if you are a Singaporean or a foreigner looking to join SQ as a cabin crew, do watch on. I think this video will help you a lot. Or maybe you're somebody who is an aviation enthusiast. You love airplanes, you love the aviation industry. If that's you, do watch on as well. We'll be going through a series of 7 questions, and the last question is actually one of the most important one of them all, so make sure you watch until the end. So without further ado, we get straight into it. So the first question is, do I have to move to Singapore if I get selected? Will they pay for my stay in Singapore? So let me answer the first one first. Do I have to move to Singapore if I get selected? Yes, you have to move to Singapore if you get selected. One main reason why we need to shift to Singapore, convenience. As cabin crew, we will get rostered for flights going overseas. However, sometimes we will get rostered for what we call standby call up. Standby call up basically means you get rostered a time slot. Usually it's 24 hours whereby you have to be on standby, meaning whenever control center calls you and says, hey, I need somebody for a flight now, can you head to the airport in, let's say, 3 hours time, 4 hours time. And the notice period sometimes can be very little. I have had colleagues who get called up for a flight and they need to report to the airport and even to the aircraft immediately. So yes, you should move to Singapore if you get selected. Over the course of my flying, I've met people who actually stay just across Singapore's border, bordering to Malaysia in Johor Bahru. Johor Bahru is really near to Singapore. There is basically you can stay anywhere you want. Just make sure you can get your ass to the airport in time when they do need you, when the airline calls you. Otherwise, it will be considered a lapse. So will they pay for my stay in Singapore? If you are a foreigner, you likely need to source and pay for your own accommodations. But I'm not too sure if there are any additional allowances for certain foreign crew of certain nationality. Your accommodation overseas, you do not need to pay. Company will pay for you when you stay in hotels overseas. Second question is, do Singapore Airlines pay for cabin crews layover? Definitely, yes. And there are 2 main reasons why. First reason is to cover our food and transport overseas, to cover our expenses overseas. And number 2, which is the more important reason, is because the allowance that we get from layover in another country is actually the main bulk of our income. Our overseas allowance is actually a very important part of our income because it forms the main bulk of where our income comes in every single month. For my experience as a Singaporean, my pay for allowance came in twice every month, and then there will be a third time where the basic salary will come in. So I remember when I used to fly, I used to really love this a lot because in 1 month, you would get 2 or 3 times of money coming into your bank account. So every 1 or 2 weeks when you check your bank, money comes in higher and higher and higher. So I used to love that so much. And just for a fun fact, if you're a Singaporean watching this, because cabin crew rely heavily on allowances that form a main bulk of their income, when we try to get a house loan or take a loan from the bank, our income is actually considered as variable income. So this will also be something to take note of when you are buying a house and if you want to apply for a loan from the bank. Third question is, what is the education qualification for cabin crew? For Singaporeans, it's a minimum of 5 O-level credits or higher 9 tech and above. It's the same for Malaysians as well. You need to have minimum 5 SPM credits. In addition to these people qualifications, you also need to make sure that you are fluent in English because you'll be conversing with international passengers. And on top of this, you need to have great soft skills. Basically, you need to have a pleasant personality and, of course, be service-oriented. Adding on further requirements for you guys, you need to be minimum 18 years old. This is to fulfill any legislative requirements that is needed when you travel overseas. You need to be able to start your employment within 3 months of applying for Singapore Airlines cabin crew. Any other further information you may find on the Singapore Airlines cabin crew website. Just Google Singapore Airlines cabin crew. Question number 4, what is the salary for cabin crew? Mine average about 5k Singapore dollars. So on good months, there's a possibility of hitting 6k and a high 6k for me. However, I did not do 7k. I don't know if there's anybody who did 7k as a crew. There probably were, because there are some people who are really hardworking. Meaning if your goal is to get a higher salary above the average of 5k, like you want to get nearer to 6k or a bit more, then you would need to prepare yourself that you'll be flying literally almost every day of the entire month and you'll be spending very little time back in Singapore. I had certain months where my salary would be 4k, but those months were definitely more relaxed months where I would be spending most of my time in Singapore and have more off days in between. So it really is up to you as well. When the company allows it, you might be able to change your flights as well. So changing of flights is actually something that is very useful, and a lot of crew love to change flights with one another. For example, if they need to be in Singapore to attend a certain event on a certain day but they can't because of the schedule, so changing of flights is a really useful way for cabin crew to shift around the schedule. Otherwise, your roster is almost always fixed by the company and your roster gets published about 1 month before. So you have about 1 month's time to sufficiently plan your schedule around. Also, I wanted to add on, my basic pay was about 1.2k Singapore dollars, so 1,200 Singapore dollars. Back in my day, the pay was a little bit higher for graduates of university. I'm not sure if it still applies now. Probably need to check with somebody who is still in the airline, who is still flying. So because I was flying from 2016 to 2021, so right now we are in 2024, and generally incomes have increased due to inflation. So the average figure that you're hearing from me, which is 5k, might be different now. It might be higher now. I'm not very sure on this, so you might want to speak to somebody who is still flying. Question number 5. Wow, there's 4 parts to this question. Will I get training after getting selected? For how long will the training continue? Where will I get the training, in my home country or Singapore? Will they pay for my stay during training? So let me break this down. Will I get training after getting selected? Yes, you will get training after getting selected. The training will continue for 4 months. It was 4 months in my day. I don't know if they have changed this now. I don't believe so. Where will I get the training, in my home country or Singapore? The training will be in Singapore, in SIA Training Center. It is in the eastern side of Singapore, which is very near to the airport. Will they pay for my stay during training? During training, you will receive a basic allowance that is less than 1,000 Singapore dollars for me back then. It is because you are a trainee, and the bulk of your income will come when you start flying. Because when you're overseas, the company will pay for your allowance and that will form the bulk of your income. It's also similar if you are training to be a pilot. When you start out as a cadet pilot, You also receive a trainee allowance, and the real ka-ching only starts coming in when you start to fly and clock in your flight hours, and you get your basic pay as well as your overseas allowance. For cabin crew, the pay was broken down into these three main parts, which is again basic allowance, which for me was about 1,200 Singapore dollars. The second part is the overseas allowance, which differs from different country, different timing as well, depending on what time you land and what time you are in the country. For this part, the allowance gets broken down into timings like breakfast, lunch, dinner. Usually dinner will have the highest allowance. Again, the figures differ from country to country. Of course, there are certain countries that pay a higher allowance, and some countries, when you lay over or you have a night stop, they pay a lower allowance. So definitely, as a crew, we used to have our favorite places that we rather fly to because we get more money in return. But of course, my personal take is if you are an aspiring cabin crew, just fly to as many countries as you possibly can if money is not the highest priority for you. Travel and go and see the world more and experience different types of cultures, weathers, countries, cuisines. Get to do that. So that's the second part. The third part is actually your flight hours. Your flight hours are basically the length of time that you spend flying. For example, from Singapore to Indonesia, Jakarta, for example, the flight time is about 1.5 hours. So the flight time that you clock is 1.5 hours, and you get paid based on that hourly basis. Back in my day, it used to be like ranging between like 10 to 15 or 13 Singapore dollars. But I believe the figures have definitely changed. So that's the third part. And your entire salary is in a combination of these three parts, which is the basic allowance, the overseas layover allowance, and the flight hours that you clock while you're flying. Next question is, how much money is required for training? If you are asking if you need to pay for training, you do not need to pay for training. The training will be backed by the company. They will pay for your training. And if you're asking how much money you need to set aside for your training, then the only money you would probably need to set aside is really actually only for your food and your transport to the training center every day, to and fro. The training was during weekdays, so during office hours, the money that I had to spend on food was usually only for lunch as well as certain breaks that we get roughly at 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. in the afternoon. Of course, you need to factor in your own expenses for your outside food as well when you take dinner, when you go out to dinner with your batchmates, for example, or you go out to dinner with anyone, and also for buying groceries to prepare for your breakfast every day. Oh, and if you are a foreign crew, you also need to budget for your rent in Singapore also. What I would recommend for this is that most foreign crew that I know, they would group together to share a condo, maybe a 3-bedroom condominium or 4-bedroom condominium, and then they would share the expenses for rent. And this would usually be near the SIA training center because training hours are actually pretty early and it's pretty intense, so you definitely want to choose somewhere that is near to the training center. That's just my recommendation, but of course if you want to stay somewhere in the west side, because the training center is the east side, right? So if you want to stay somewhere else, like, it's fine as well, but my recommendation would definitely, during training especially, would be to stay as close to the training center as you can, because the reporting hours are early and it's daily from Monday to Friday. Training is intense, so it can get physically tiring. By the time you go home, you want to chillax, relax, and then you need to sleep, and then the next morning you need to wake up early to prepare for training. That's my recommendation. Get a room as near to the training center as possible. We have reached the last question, which is the most important one of them all, because this question you will need to know if you want to pass your cabin crew training and start flying overseas, traveling all around the globe and eating all your new cuisines, meeting new people, flying and then just traveling wanderlust to everything. You will need to know this question is the most important one of them all if you want to pass your training. Alright, so the last question is, how many marks are required to pass during training and exams? To answer this question, it really depends because there is a range of training and exams, and I've written a list down while I go through it with you. So for exams, there are both physical type of exams as well as MCQ type of exams. MCQs are basically multiple choice questions. So the physical exams and the MCQ exams are based on various topics that can go from communication to grooming to in-flight service to in-flight safety, security, first aid, and more. For MCQs, the passing mark is usually around 80% passing rate because as a cabin crew, knowledge is super important, knowledge accuracy. And the reason why is because we need to be well prepared to handle in the event there is any emergencies. It could be turbulence, medical emergencies, fires, evacuations, and you need to know how to operate emergency equipment like oxygen masks, oxygen tanks, life vests, evacuation slides as well. When you're a cabin crew, you're not just there for serving food, you are also responsible for maintaining the security of the entire aircraft alongside your teammates, because this is a team effort. Because during a flight, there will be many people coming from all around the world, many different types of passengers. You need to know how to handle different types of passengers from different backgrounds, walks of lives, even passengers that are being unruly. There are so many stories that I've heard from my colleagues and my personal experience of passengers getting drunk on flights. And not just that, because Singapore Airlines is an international carrier with a crazy high brand name. They definitely will train you in customer service skills, which is what they are known for, number one, and communication, how you communicate in the aircraft across your teammates, conflict resolution to ensure that passengers' needs are being met throughout the flight. In-flight service that you provide is different across different regions. For example, if you're flying to a short flight, the in-flight service is different if you're providing for a longer flight, like a super long flight like the 22 hours non-stop New York flight from Singapore to New York. That definitely has a different in-flight service from if you were just to fly to somewhere in the region from Singapore to Hong Kong, for example. Training will definitely cover the serving of meals and beverages, assisting passengers with special dietary needs. People are gluten-free, some people are vegetarian, for example. Providing different information about the flight, not forgetting that there's different aircraft configurations that SQ flies. Like there's the Airbus, there's the Boeing series as well. And you need to learn how to handle different types of food and beverages, how to prepare the perfect Singapore sling, the perfect Bloody Marys, and of course how to absorb all of these training into your knowledge library over here and be able to deliver it out to the passenger and provide the service that is timely and efficient. And of course, because you'll be flying to different countries, these different countries have different regulatory compliances as well. So that's why you will need to be well versed in all of this. Of course, pass your exams eventually. So that's it, you guys. I have reached the end of the questions that have been so kindly typed hyped out by one of our viewers over here. Hope that this video has helped you a lot in understanding a little bit more about what it takes to be a cabin crew, especially about the training side of things. Do comment down below what is your favorite part of this video, or which part of this video, which part of this Q&A made you feel surprised or made you feel a certain emotion or a thought that you have that you never knew? Or is it something that you already knew and you're like, you know, like, this video is awesome? You can just comment that as well. Do leave a comment down below. I would really appreciate it. If you're new to this channel, welcome. Do hit the like and subscribe button as well, so that you will get notified of any videos that I post immediately. For those of you who have noticed, I've started doing some yoga as well. Recently, I'm really into the yoga and spirituality stuff, so I will be sharing more of that on my channel. And yes, that's basically it. Thank you so much for watching. I wish you guys a blessed day ahead. Yes, if you're still watching until here and you're aspiring to be a cabin crew, I do want to give one last tip for you, especially if you're past the interview and you are going to embark on your training. So one small tip that I would like to share with you that I think would really help in your journey before you embark on it. When you start your training, you'll get assigned to a batch. This is basically a group of around 20 people that you will be calling your batch mates. So one small tip that I have for you is training is for 4 months, and although you are only stuck with these 20 people for 4 months, one small tip I would share with you is to treasure your batch mates, because from your batch, actually, some of the people you'll meet there in your batch are the people who you will find support from, emotional support, mental support, even physical support during the training. And also within your batch, you can forge such strong bonds. There are certain batches that I know that were training back in 2016, and they are still as tight as ever until today. So yeah, you are basically part of your batch also, so respect everyone, be nice to everyone, smile, and it will go a long way. Alright, you never know what kind of friendships you will be forging from your batches with your batch mates, and some of these friendships last for a lifetime. Alright, and yeah, I guess this is just a behind the scenes tip, I guess. I'm really signing off for real now. Thank you for watching. Bye!